Hello, residents of silo-numbered Woolshift Dust. Our favorite Apple Sci-Fi series is coming to an end this week, just as our other favorite Apple Sci-Fi series is starting a new season. And of course, by that I mean Severance, whose first episode of season 2 drops on Friday, in addition to Silo's season finale. We will not be covering Severance on this feed, although we are big fans, but allow me to introduce you to the crew covering this twisty thriller on the separate Severance Lorehounds feed. First, a quick note about the Silo episode this week. Luke, unfortunately, started this week with a few days in the hospital. Don't worry, it's not life-threatening, but he needs some rest and some time off the mic while he's recovering from his shoulder injury. So please do send him your well wishes on Blue Sky and Discord. And that means that this week we will be largely Lukeless, although he has sent in a voicemail with his thoughts in the finale. I will instead be joined this week by John from the Lorehounds, and he was last heard in this feed in the Silo Season 1 wrap-up awards show. A big thank you to John for stepping in, and Luke will return for the mailbag wrap-up episode to talk about the season in more depth. We're still aiming to produce that one late next week, pending his recovery, so keep sending in your thoughts about the season, and thank you to all of you who have so far. I will respond to everyone personally as I'm putting together the episode. As for John, our guest host for this week, you can also listen to him right now, as he's one of the 4 hosts for the Severance Lorehounds podcast. He joins David, also from the Lorehounds, last heard in this feed in the Dune Prophecy Prep ep, and soon to be heard again in part 1 of the Dune book breakdown. And you may recognize Anthony, whom you can listen to talking about the Game of Thrones universe in the George R. Martin and Poe crossover episode in this feed. He and his properly Howard co-host, stand-up comedian Steve, complete the quartet of hosts for the Severance Lorehounds podcast. As for what else to expect this season, I'll let the guys speak for themselves. Here is their preview episode breaking down their second season coverage to come. Check the show notes for a link to the feed where you can catch up on season 1 and listen to the rest. Speak to you all on Friday.
Don't pervert a handbook passage to me, okay?
Welcome to a properly Howard and Lorehounds joint production on Severance, the hit TV show from Apple TV+. I'm John, and with me today, I'll introduce you one at a time. We've got the man whose heart is in conflict with itself, David.
I'm so conflicted.
We've got the guy who didn't like the Penguin as much as you did, Anthony.
I didn't like it as much as anyone did, I guess.
And the guy who can't be scripted, Steve.
Hello.
And here today, we're going to talk about our hopes and dreams for season 2 of Severance, our coverage plans, and our thoughts on season 1. So let's go around and just give a quick background on our Severance histories. Anthony, do you want to start?
I do. I think that this is the perfect show. I feel like I've been waiting for this show for, I don't know, 35 years. I feel like sci-fi has... I feel like the history of science fiction on the screen had to evolve in order to give us this show. I think first off, when you'd see a sci-fi show or a movie, visually it looked bad, the writing was bad, the acting was bad, but it might have had a really cool concept. And then after a while, we got sort of like, oh, wow, this production's really fantastic. The visual effects are amazing, but the writing's still bad and the acting's still And then we got sort of like all the way to Black Mirror, where it's like, oh, the writing's good and the acting's good. And unfortunately, taking itself very seriously. And finally, I feel like this, which is I would consider a hard sci-fi, does take itself a little bit seriously at times, but I almost feel like it's a comedy. And I feel like it sort of is running the gamut of my emotions in a way that any good drama should. It just happens to be a hard sci-fi. So I love this show. I think it's I really do think it's a science fiction achievement.
Does any one part of the show stand out more for you than the other, like the visuals or the characters or the moral dilemmas or the ethics or Or is it a real equal balance?
I think the first time I watched it was sort of the concept and Dylan. I came for the concepts.
You stayed for the Zach Cherry.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I laughed every single time. And then Steve and I did our rewatch.
You did. Right on this feed that we're on right now.
That's right. Yeah, we did our rewatch, and I think I really enjoyed the sort of the mystery box element of it. Trying to unravel the mystery. And then I just watched it last night with my daughter for the first time. She did a binge, and I sat down and watched the last 3 episodes with her. And she was just pointing out like things about the way that color is used. She's a visual artist, so she notices things I don't. The way that the colors are used in this, and the sort of the symbolic value of the color orange, which I had never seen before. So a lot of attention paid to detail.
Maybe you should get her on the podcast.
Yeah, I don't have to come back. I do not have to be here at all. Anyway, I've appreciated something different every time.
Cool.
Steve, what you got for us on your Severance history and everything you learned covering season 1?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo a lot of what Anthony says. I haven't had a lot of really great experience with a hard sci-fi on television, and this one is it's an interesting concept. So it kind of pulls you in, and I think it took me like maybe a moment into watching even the first episode that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm watching sci-fi, even though I kind of understood. This is a surreal concept. This is playing with technology. It's sort of, unknown when this takes place. So there's all the different sci-fi elements, but I was so kind of wrapped in the characters and just the basic notion of the concept that it took me a minute to realize, well, I'm engrossed in this, and it's also this hard sci-fi, which is, to me, it's a hard task, right, to pull off, to where you can be engrossed in the actual characters, and and each character has 2 characters, with each one, which I think is fascinating, right? And they're developing that in such a way that it trusts you to know what's going on to some degree, at least in terms of this is how these worlds would work. So it doesn't belabor that, right? And it sort of just thrusts you into it, and it pays you the compliment of saying you can get in here and you can, even though there's things you're not going to figure out, that's in the intent, but you're in the world, in both worlds, and that really is super impressive to me. I do find it really funny at times, which is necessary because this is a very deep, dark take on the concept of work-life balance, on the concept of just work and what we do in life to try to cope with whether it's tragedy or just the monotony, and which maybe they're not mutually exclusive, the concepts, but I really I find myself loving the mystery almost to the point where I don't want a solution.
Steve, am I correct in the assumption that you are the... Well, no, John has a day job. You have a day job too, right?
Yes.
And does it resonate with you, the cubicle life sort of? Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of that feels like...
I mean, I don't mean to diminish your stand-up comic.
No, exactly. But that's well, there's an interesting, right? Because I do that's the whole idea, right? For having a stand-up comedy life, I feel like I need to sever from my day-to-day monotony, right? And it's like, but the idea that one doesn't lead into the other is the antithesis of what the show is talking about, right? Like the show says we just cut it off, and part of what makes the balance work is the fact that you are teetering into 2 different worlds, and you have to, and it's the balance is the goal, so to speak, in that regard. And that's why I just think this show just really works on so many different levels, from a sci-fi perspective, from a life in the cubicle perspective. Like I said, I like not knowing things, which is really easy for me because I don't know a lot in general. So this is right in my wheelhouse. And baby goats, come on, are you kidding me? I love goats.
Baby goats. Very good. I'm really excited to see the explanation for that. And I think you're hitting on a really, really interesting point, Steve, which is that it is hard sci-fi technically, but the way that they implement it is like, let's just take sort of late stage capitalism where we are in the world right now. Let's just change one aspect of it to be more literal than it is figurative in the real world and go with that. And that's why it feels so relatable, even though we don't have a procedure like Severance in the real world. We do have bosses who say like, hey, your work is your work, and nothing should happen from the outside world in your work life, right? We do have people who try to put up these hard walls between their work life and their home life.
Or tell their workers that they're a family, you know?
Yeah.
All that,
or sate you with eggs.
I love you, Heliar.
Oh my God.
Sure.
But I mean, I am a podcaster who uses a pseudonym, and I treat my podcasting persona as sort of a character. And so for me, like, yeah, we all put different faces on for all different interactions. And it just so happens that in this world, that's literal instead of something that clicks in your mind. This is something that is implanted in your mind.
Yeah. No,
That's cool stuff.
I could, yeah. As someone who's sort of like, I can really relate to this, John, because there are certain things that are more passion projects. Like in this last episode of season 1, we find out that Irv is an artist who's sort of has a monotony, like something about his art that is repetitive, right? And yet it is his passion project over and over and over. And yet his work life is monotonous in a different way. He's rounding up numbers basically, but he's looking he's sort of looking for artwork around his very limited environment at work to try to feed that part of his creativity. And so I think that there is an aspect of that I feel like, you know, I would like my work life to feel a little bit more creative, and maybe I would like my creative life to bleed a little bit more into, you know, myself holistically. But it's interesting that it seems like each of these characters are severed for a different reason.
Yeah.
I don't know if we know Dylan's situation yet, but.
Yeah, it could just be he was offered a promotion and they were like, you have to work on the severed floor, and he goes, cool. You know, it could have just been as simple as that.
The muscle shows weren't paying as well.
So, David, we haven't gotten your take yet on season 1. Do you want to give your 2 cents?
Yeah, I like a lot of what you guys have been saying. There's something that Steve said that kind of struck me, that this show treats us like adults. Right. It's not doing exposition dump. There isn't Johnny Exposition there to, you know, deliver 2 minutes of dialogue to explain the political context of things. There isn't. We're just in the world, and the show treats us like we can figure it out. And I think I appreciate a show that does that. It's very refreshing. I can't help but think of, sometimes when I see them in their cubicles doing the macro data refinement, and I'm thinking of Andor and what's our friend Cyril Karn when he's doing whatever the fuel analysis stuff, and there's just sea of cubicles. But you know, because we like to mix our IPs around here. But I watched 8 and 9 last night, and I'm kind of contemplating doing a reverse watch order, like watch season 1 but backwards. But I was so struck last night by the visual design and the simplicity of the sets and the production design. But the thing about the simplicity of it and the cleanness of it and the intention, that's harder. That's harder to do. To get those camera angles to work, to get those lighting scenarios to work. There were some scenes of them running down the hallways. Like, that was incredible. The camera work that is going into, like, when he's holding the switches at the end. It is a phenomenally well-crafted show. And I guess we've read some news media reports here and there or something like that the showrunner and the director, writer, I don't know, is it Stiller and Erickson or something? Like, there's a lot of active animosity on set, like they hate each other or something. And it seems to be like one of those pressure cooker boiler situations of creativity that is just producing this exceptional result. Michelin star level TV entertainment. You can sit down, you can watch this. It's entertaining. It's visually compelling. The acting is amazing. I mean, to have Totoro, Arquette, and Walken all on screen together is like, what a feast.
I bet you the showrunners just had Mr. Milchick come in character and just sit him down and say, like, listen, smile on his face, you got to get this together. It's time to get it together. So before we do this season 2 business.
That's right. Tremel Tillman is amazing as Milchick. Just it's so well put together on every single level. And then it's a mystery box. And then it's a hard sci-fi. Like those are the outer wrappers for it to me, and then it's moral and philosophical questions of work and life and truth and lie and identity and all of these things. Like the further out you go, these wider and wider spheres of it. But at the end of the day, it's just a really freaking entertaining television show.
Yep. And I am a known detractor of mystery boxes.
You are. It is true.
Every time I see a mystery box come up in like Rings of Power or something, I'm like, motherfucker, I don't need this. I don't need it. You don't need it. Just tell me a story. But this show, it's so central to the plot, and it's satisfying in the way that every episode seems to reveal just enough to keep you satisfied.
Yeah.
But then raise more questions in the way that sort of like early Lost did that.
Right.
I think it's just an incredibly done thing. And so I'll take anything if it's well done,
That's a big lesson for the mystery box, is not to do Lost, where we're 6 seasons in and we're like still asking questions and discovering mysteries, and we haven't solved anything from 1 or 2.
Look, Lost ended in a way that satisfied every viewer, so I don't know what you're talking about.
So Steve and I have had this conversation a lot. I do at times enjoy shows that have a nice, neat bow at the end. And Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. You do prefer, I think that you prefer the more broadening horizon where the viewer or reader at the end has to decide for themselves what happened.
And I think we've talked about how I really enjoy short stories versus full novels. I like to pop into a world and then get pulled out. That world existed before I got there, and I need it to exist after I leave. And I like that, maybe the tension of just getting the snapshot. I also think that most of the time things are not tied up well. Because, and this is, we'll get into like some of our what we're looking forward to for the next season, but I have a lot of concern, and you mentioned Lost, and maybe it's still PTSD from Lost. Whereas when you create something that's like where the mystery becomes almost so rich that you're like, well, the more that you start to reveal and the more it seems to be fraying away from maybe where I thought it was going to be, the bigger the challenge is to try to tie these things together. And that's when I start getting concerned on that effort. Like sometimes, just staying weird is fine. As long as it's captivating and it kind of makes sense in the world that you've created. But like, I can't even conceive right now of how I would want this to end in a way that would be like, oh, and now it all wraps up.
Well, I think the mystery has to serve the characters and not the other way around, right? Like the characters have to be the center of it, which they are in the show, and I think that's why it works so well. And the mystery is just another challenge for them to navigate.
Right, and with the idea that each character is essentially 2 characters, it feels that there's an inevitable death, right, for each one of them.
Mm-hmm. Unless they can figure out reintegration.
Yeah, but then to what end, right? And what is that? Okay, you reintegrate, but essentially, like you've combined 2 and maybe killed 2 at the same time. I mean, it's right. Almost a rebirth. You create a third to some degree.
Right. Well, we're getting a little bit into our speculation for the future for season 2. So I want to talk quickly about our coverage plans and where you can find the show, because that's really important on the show. This is a Lorehounds Properly Howard joint production, which means this is only going to be on the Severance feed. So this episode and maybe episode 1, we'll talk about it, will be on probably the Lorehounds feed and the Properly Howard feed. But the full season will only be on the Severance feed. So that will be on the joint feed. It'll be linked in the show notes if you are on not the Severance feed. And so if you want to get full coverage, you got to subscribe. You got to hit subscribe right now. Go do it before you forget. And then you'll get nice notifications, and it's free. Just go do it. Click the follow button on your podcatcher. Are we doing that now? Of choice. So go do that. Pause and unpause. All right. You did it. You're subscribed. You're here. What are our coverage plans? David, do you want to go through our weekly coverage?
We're going to do weekly coverage.
That's great. You did a great job, man.
Thank you so much. I'm a professional. I've worked for years to hone my craft. The four of us, as scheduling allows, as life happens, but we will always have a quorum of 3, and we'll be taking feedback to severance@thelorehounds.com, and we'll filter that up. And if we have a preponderance of feedback, then we might have to spin it off, but we'll try to tack it on at the end. It depends on length and scheduling. I don't know that we've worked out that particular detail, but we always do prefer your emailed feedback. We also take voicemails. You can just send a voicemail, a voice recording to that same email address. And of course, we have our Discord, and we'll have that'll be in the show notes as well. You're welcome there. It's a great community conversation space. We have a great moderator team keeping things running, and we'll have episode threads for each episode so that you can watch at your own pace. And if you're not quite caught up, you can still have conversation before jumping into the next week's show. All of that will be linked in the show notes.
Yep. There's a nice little link tree you can do everything in. So for now, I think let's take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to talk about our hopes and dreams for season 2. And we're back. So we've got season 2 coming. I think everyone's excited based on the first 20 minutes of our conversation where we did nothing but gush about season 1. But we've got some new players coming in. So I wanted to sort of bring in some of those. We see some stills in the trailers where we see like Elysia Shawkat. I can never say her name right. And we know Gwendolyn Christie is coming in as an unknown character. Like what's everyone? Steve, you want to start? What are you excited for in season 2?
Yeah, as I sort of mentioned, I'm excited because I'm nervous because I'm like I the idea that new characters are coming in like sort of vexes me to some degree because I'm like, well, how? And like we're still getting to know 2 layers of these other these main characters, and so I get a little bit anxious about the idea that like, okay, are we introducing new, when The Office started to grow and, the series The Office started to grow, it's like, well, in order for us to, give Andy Bernard his just due, that means maybe some other characters are going to get a little lessened. And so I'm excited that a lot of these cast members, I'm thrilled to see how they mix in for sure. But I do get a little nervous about the idea that like how part of what makes me enjoy this world is kind of the claustrophobic sense of it. And so I'm all for adding more to the claustrophobia. I just don't necessarily want my world to expand quite yet.
That's interesting. How did you feel when we brought in the Christopher Walken unit of season 1?
See, that was a nice. It's that flirtation with there's more, right? There's so much more going on. We see a glimpse of goats. We get a taste of Walken, and so the idea is that there's so much more out there. And I don't. Have you guys ever? I don't know if you've ever been to like one of these like interactive like art experiences. Like I went to this thing called Omega Mart in Las Vegas, which is this. It's a fake supermarket. and all the products are fake, and it's all this art collective, and you go in, and there's like you open up a freezer door, and then that takes you into a psychedelic cavern that you're now.
Okay, all right.
into,
This sounds
right?
more
So-
interesting than just fake shopping.
Right. Yeah. So, but like there's like a display of like tent gear, and then you go inside the tent, and you're crawling now into a new world, and you can follow a scavenger hunt. There's all this story that goes along. It actually feels very Severance-y.
Steve, are you sure this wasn't a mushroom trip?
I never am. I'm not even sure this conversation is real. But so there's something about that where it's like doing that actually kind of got me in the mindset for Severance season 2, because I'm like, well, here's another door and here's another weird thing. And I kind of got lost in there for a really long time. So I guess my feeling is, if there's going to be these more characters, and we're going to get into maybe more parts of this building, I kind of want the series to go on, like take its time is what I really want. And that's what it's done so far. So I'm hoping that, again, there's been so much time in between the 2 seasons. I start getting concerned, like, well, especially if there's friction on the set, is this going to be something that's going to go on long enough? And is it going to, explore the world enough to where I can continue to sort of live in each spot for a while?
Yeah. That's cool. I appreciate your cautious optimism, Steve. David?
I'm worried too. I don't think I was worried until Steve sort of gave voice to my fears. In as much as it's like, okay, we've got goats and we have, weird stage actors doing, dances. I was thinking last night, I was watching like who made the eggs and who made the water, like there's a whole other layer of business that's happening that we're not even seeing at Lumon Industries. And I'm worried that if they do expand and they do get a little bit of a lost into it, like we're just going to have mystery upon mystery and it's never going to get solved. And maybe that's okay. Maybe if they handle that right and we don't ever find out why goats, that would be fine.
No, I got to know why the goats. I'm not leaving that one unturned.
So I don't really know a lot of the actors I'm not familiar with a lot of the actors that they're the new ones that they're bringing in. I just watched the trailer before we sat down to record as well. And yeah, I guess, I don't know. I'm just here to see what I'm putting my trust in the showrunner and the writer, no matter how much animosity and no matter how much difficulty there was, getting hit by the strikes and, after coming out of the COVID stuff. I think there is a intensity of, there is such an intensity behind the creative team on this that I don't think there couldn't be conflict on the set in terms of getting this done. And sometimes that makes some of the best movies and television shows, is because people are so committed and passionate about it. In terms of like the cliffhanger was so great, the way that they ramped up the tension in 8 and 9. I'm just really, I don't have a lot of expectations. I'm not worried in as much as like if I do have fears, they're these very vague, soft fears, but they handled season 1 so well that they'd really have to screw up badly for season 2. And I don't have any worries about that at all.
It's kind of funny to me that I think what they want us to be most interested in is the fact that Gemma is alive and what's going on the bottom floor and all that stuff. Where everyone I talk to is like, what's up with those goats? They're like, we're going to find out what's going on with Gemma and we're all going to be disappointed that they never explained things.
They were never goat related again.
How come they never explained where those deviled eggs come from?
Look, it's all connected. Good? It's all connected. Anthony, what's your hopes and dreams for season 2?
Okay. I love some of the casting choices. Like if you think of Gwendolyn Christie, like you, in order to be on the show, you need to do serious face well, And I just think of like every episode she was in Game of Thrones, she was like serious face.
She's just going to be Brienne of Tarth,
right?
During the show.
Same thing with what was it? Beyond the Lake, or was it the?
Oh shit, Gwendolyn Christie. Oh,
What was she? She was in some New Zealand production called Beyond the Lake or something like that. I'm getting the name wrong. Also, Bob Balaban. I mean, does
Yeah,
anyone
Bob
do
Balaban.
better serious face than Bob Balaban? Like, have you ever seen that guy crack a smile ever? Like, 40 years on the screen, never smiled once. So I think he's perfect. Perfect for this. There's one thing that I kind of, like I said, I unabashedly love this show. I think it's almost the perfect show. The one scene in the entire first season that didn't work for me was the drilling into the corpse of Petey to get the chip back. It seemed ridiculous.
Oh God, I don't remember that. What episode was that? That was earlier on, wasn't it?
2 or 3 or something like that. Miss Selvig, Cobell, whoever, she sneaks into Petey's funeral.
Oh yeah.
Goes into the back, drills into his skull, extracts his chip. And it's all very important to do this. Very high stakes, very high risk in order to get this chip back to analyze it. And what they find out is that it's possible to reintegrate, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need that to pay off at some point. I need them to tell us why they needed that guy's chip in particular to justify doing something so outlandish. So I really hope that they sort of bring in, and then Selvig creates a necklace with that chip. She takes Petey's chip, puts it around a chain, puts it around her neck, and starts wearing it around.
Well, part of it is she never told the board that was possible, right? This was something she was kind of keeping close to the chest and
yes,
saving.
Why does she think it's a good idea? Why do her and Milchick both think it's a good idea to be able to prove reintegration is possible? And why is the board so resistant to the idea that reintegration is possible? Because if the board's end game is to try to sever everyone in the world, that's sort of like, they're testing these guys in the basement so that they can then roll out the beta program or whatever. It seems like that'd be a selling point. Like, oh, if I want to undo the severance procedure, am I able to do that? I want to know that I'm able to undo that. So why is the board resistant to the idea of reintegration? I'm going to need that explained to me at some point.
See, I'm not convinced that they are. I'm not convinced that anything that in Selvig's world is what we think it is.
I think it's an interesting question because if Cobell, Selvig, she seems to be higher up in the organization than she seems to have a lot of power and authority. And we don't see, because we haven't really seen any of their operational divisions of Lumon anywhere else. And so when they fire her, it's really quite a surprise because, like, why are you cutting loose somebody who knows so much, who's both innie and outie, right?
Well, one of the things that Steve and I kind of mused on is whether this entire town might be severed on some level. Like maybe the entire town's a bubble that's being studied because the people, Rickon's friends are just as weird as anyone we meet at Lumon. And someone, that town, I mean, it could just be this is sort of a weird Dr. Seuss kind of town. And we're just kind of supposed to buy into that. But it feels like there's a larger, there's something weird going on in this particular town.
Getting out doesn't necessarily feel like freedom.
Yeah. Right. Because even like the punk rock bands are singing about Lumon. So it's like Lumon doesn't just determine what these worker bees do. They also determine how people are rebelling in this town. Like, is there anyone in this town that doesn't care about Lumon?
It's like a logging town, but it's tech.
Sure. Yeah.
Well,
Company
they
town.
did release a short story in between seasons called Severance, the Lexington Letter, and it does go to a different Lumon location
Oh.
with a different severed person. So we know that there are more than one, headquarters with severed employees. So this is definitely a big corporation, bigger than just this town.
Interesting.
That doesn't mean that the town isn't part of the corporation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Especially because, it's housing from the corporation, which, we could talk about the history of company towns and how that was kind of terrible, and we should not go back to that. But yeah, it's definitely a massive mega corporation.
Yeah.
And you could see that even just with the shareholder meeting that they have where Helly, blows the lid on Severance. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things we learned in the trailer. We had this big cliffhanger of what's going to happen to them now that they expose the innies to the world. Are they going to just disappear? Do they have to run? And if you don't want spoilers for the trailer, I guess see ya in a little bit. I think we're gonna be talking pretty freely from here. But in the trailer, we see Milchick saying to them, you two, you all caused a really painful situation for the company, but you're now the face of severance reform. And that's a really interesting thing to me because that feels like I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. And that's scarier.
Mm-hmm. But it's smart PR from a corporate standpoint, right? Is to jujitsu flip the play.
Well, yeah, but that with Milchick there, it's not just gonna be nice guy, it's gonna be nice guy short leash.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're gonna have to deal with that. And I think that's a really interesting way to play it. Instead of making them go on the run all of a sudden, it's no, yeah, we're gonna coddle you guys. We're gonna coddle you guys so well. You're gonna love it here. I don't know. Does anyone else have a thought on how this is gonna play out?
I did not see the trailer, but Milchick always has struck me as the nice guard in Shawshank who he could get cut loose at any minute to be the heavy, right?
Yeah, which is what's so beautiful. He's an iron fist in a velvet glove. He's so personable. I want to hang out with him, but at any moment he could, I want him to be my dom daddy. He's so.
Sir, this is a PG podcast. It's not a PG podcast.
Well, no, but you're right about that because even when he's smiling, his eyes are menacing.
Yeah.
He's almost, that guy's smile is it's something. It's scary. It's scary.
Yeah, it is.
Whenever he's being nice, I almost feel more icky than when he's being openly aggressive.
Exactly, which is why this whole "you're the face of severance reform" with a smile on his face is way scarier to me. I think this is going to be a really interesting way to approach season 2, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens here. What do we think is going to happen with Devin, knowing that I guess she doesn't know that Miss Casey is Gemma, but she knows that Gemma is alive. How are they going to tackle that plot line?
Does she know that?
Yeah, she said she's what's his name? Mark said she's alive at the end of last season.
Yeah.
He did say that.
Then he
gets cut off.
Well,
does she know that that's what he meant?
Yeah, in the trailer it suggests that she knows.
Okay.
Yeah. It suggests that she understands.
All right.
So I think they're going there.
Well, and it adds that they've got a chip in their brain.
Yeah.
So at the end of all of this, there's a chip in their brain, and so what we're getting are these little glimpses of how they're being talked to, and maybe it's lip service or whatever, but it's also well, what do they know now? Do they know? Are we to assume? I'll find out, but are we to assume that it's okay? Well, innies and outies are a little bit. It's a little bit congested, and the outies know what what they're hearing that their innies did, and vice versa. Or do these innies are they being fed different information? It's can you reset the chip to some degree, right? I mean, maybe there are limits, and that's what this is playing with. And we're just to assume that everything just sort of picks up where it leaves off. But that's where I think the fascination for the show is, where it's just to have no recollection of when the innies are going in the out, where are the out guys? They're just not there.
Speaking of this a little bit more, I was scanning through the Wikipedia article quickly today also just to refresh some of the details. And it noted something that I guess I didn't pick up on in season 1, which is that the senator's wife got a severance procedure to avoid the pain of childbirth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's a commercial application of severance beyond office culture, right? That's a whole other product line.
Well, and the fascinating thing there, and this is kind of, it almost feels like maybe on some level of commentary on like our phones, right? Like, well, I don't go on TikTok. I don't do all this stuff. I just use my phone to text, and I have a few apps. I'm not one of these guys that's a slave to it, yet I always have it with me and it's always listening, right? And so like the chip is like, well, I'm not getting the chip to make my whole life different. I'm just doing it for specific instances, whether it's childbirth, whether it's something like I don't want to go on this long trip because it's boring, so I'm going to just sever as I go on a road trip. But the chip's there, right? And I think that's kind of where I was getting at too with these stories and everything. It's like whatever they're being told, they're still at the mercy of whatever, to some degree, Lumon chooses that they get to know. And where are the boundaries on that, right? Like once that chip's in, it's in. And what does that mean exactly, right? And so yeah, senator's wife, in her mind, I'm only going through, a few hours or a couple days of severance, and that's it. But,
yeah,
if you're driving a Tesla, the IT guys have got control of your car whenever they want.
Exactly.
So, Steve, do you think they're going to cast Ian McDermott in season 5?
Execute Order 66.
Is that where we're going here?
I think that's going to happen with most electric cars. I think that's going to happen with all of our phones. And why wouldn't it happen to the severance chips?
Fair enough. And Rickon, my favorite character. What does season 2 have in store for him? He's finally gotten the approval of Mark, which he's always wanted.
Right. And his book seems to be a hit, and he has a lot of fans.
That seaweed really works.
It does.
I love Rickon. Every scene he's in, I always think like, why is she with this guy? Like, what is?
Yeah, totally.
What is he bringing to this relationship?
That's why I don't buy the outside as being just a regular town.
He's weird. He's most of his friends are weird. There was that one woman, Rebecca, who can't read because her eyes are too small.
Yep. And she had some scratches on the back of her
because of her bird. She has a bird that scratched the back.
That's
of
a writer who actually has owned a bird or had a friend who had a bird. That's like a real thing.
Oh man.
So I need more Rebecca in my life. I would like to see just a buddy comedy with Rebecca and her bird. And at one point she said, after hearing Rickon's book read, she said, I'm going to have to change my name again. Mm-hmm. I kind of want her to have a new name. I want to know what it is.
Oh, and what about I saw it in the previously on at the start of episode 8 there, I believe it was a woman in the basement who used a bat quite violently on somebody. Like there's a whole...
Oh, Ragabi.
There's like a resistance, a rebellion, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, Ragabi is a technician at Lumon, and she is the person who basically helped Petey reintegrate.
Right.
And she claims that if Petey had followed her instructions, it would have gone better for him. But she's the one that kills Grainer.
Right.
She kills Grainer and tells Mark to go dispose of his clothing. So, yeah, is she acting alone? Is she part of a resistance group? One of
the things Anthony and I talked about in the rewatch is just like the whole Petey part. You forget it's only 9 episodes.
Yeah.
And like by the time you're like on the last 3, like Petey's
distant memory.
Yeah. And it's wild how that was the show for the first part. And I think that's, again, a testament to how this show tackles so many complex concepts, but in a way that feels linear without knowing how anything connects. Like, it's a really fascinating tapestry that they put together, because we're only getting little segments of it, right? We don't, and, but it's still compelling. And then you realize there's so many other things that have, like, again, this is going to the faith. I feel like I have enough faith, the same way as David, with the show runners, is that they just kind of did the things that I would have been worried about had I not known that they were going to happen. Like, how were you going to have all of this stuff happen and still be compelling, still keep the mystery going, but still feel like I've seen characters develop and I'm hanging on to every single moment. And
we're hitting 10 episodes this season.
Yeah.
Which is between 40 and 50 minutes, or an hour. I think the average, the runtime is between 40 and 57 minutes last season. So these are going to be dense, but full. And it felt like they really understood the job of breaking a season and the flow and the tempo of building our expectations, and then breaking our, and then breaking that tension, building the tension, breaking the tension throughout the whole season. So I really do feel like we're in for a really well put together plot line and pacing of the story.
I'm glad they're doing as many episodes as they want. I have one fun question for everyone before we head out of here.
How many episodes?
10.
Oh, all right. Okay.
So I have one fun question.
Anthony was severed in that moment. I didn't realize.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
It's amazing that we got this whole podcast done with our innies. I mean, So here's my fun question, inspired by Anthony's Would You Rathers. So you get to take one of the four people, one of the quartet out, for a day. One of the innies out for a day to a location that you think would surprise and delight them. Who do you bring, and where do you bring them? David, I kind of gave you a little warning on this one, so I'm going to have you start.
So it's got to be one of our primary four, right?
Yeah, I mean, you don't really have many other severed people.
No, it's true. It's true. I don't know. I think I kind of would like to hang out with Helly, actually. Kind of a Hellcat, but pretty cool. I don't know that I would hang with Mark Scout very well. He just seems like, I don't know, that we'd have a lot to talk with. And Dylan, I just kind of, I don't know that I would have a lot to say at the end of the day with Dylan.
Now, where would you take Helly, though?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that. Come back to me. Let me think about it. I know. Wait, to Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor, which I don't think exists anymore in Portland, Oregon, which is the kind of place that they come out in like hats and they have a big boom drum when it's your birthday, and you can get a thing called the Pig's Trough, which is like full of ice cream and you and your friends can all share. Mm-hmm. It's got an arcade. It's just a wild, it's like a old timey ice cream parlor that is a predecessor to all the Chuck E. Cheese nonsense.
All right, very nice, very nice.
And maybe a mall, and because it was next to a mall.
All right,
so we'll do some mall shopping, and then we'll go get some ice cream afterwards.
You can include the mall. I'll allow it.
Thank you. It could be in the mall.
All right, I'm going to give Anthony and Steve a little more time since I sprung this on them, and I'll give mine. I would take Dylan Innie to Costco for the free samples. You show that guy a free sample, and he is off the wall happy. I think that can make him happier than anything else in the world. Steve or Anthony, who wants to go first?
I think I want to take Irv axe throwing.
Nice. I like that.
I feel like he'd be a good conversationalist, but also would also shut up for a little bit. Like, that's what I'm thinking about. Like, Dylan, I really would like to go hear what he has to say, but I think that would get old after a while. Mm-hmm. But I think Irv would get a real kick out of letting loose with some axes and wood.
I think his predilection, his artist, whatever that intensity he has is in there, and to come out in the axe throwing, I think would be really fascinating to see. I like that.
Anthony?
I think it's Helly. I think she's the one that I probably most relate to. I really love Dylan, but Steve convinced me that Dylan is fun to watch, but he would not be fun to hang out with.
I think that's right. That's why you got to get the free samples in his mouth so that he can't talk at you the whole time.
So I'm going to say heli, and I'm going to say monster truck show.
Wow. Heli's
ne-
gonna have a heck of a day.
I've never been to one. I would like to go with someone
This
who,
Sunday.
Right.
This Sunday only.
I would
I'm
like
wearing
to
a
go
monster truck
with
shirt
someone
right now.
This is why I don't want Steve to go. I don't want to go with someone who enjoys monster truck shows. I want to go with someone who like
Horrified by it.
be horrified or make fun of it, that kind of thing. Steve, I feel like would be drunk in 10 minutes. He would be shouting.
He's wearing a monster truck t-shirt.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Okay. So heli monster truck show.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And poor Mark S. getting no love here. Any Mark is just a loser of the bunch. Nobody wants to hang out with him. Probably why he's so depressed. All right. That's about it, I think. Unless anybody else has parting thoughts on Severance season 1 and hopes for season 2.
I just want to shout out the typeface. Beautiful typeface.
Beautiful
No,
typeface.
very good call.
Yeah, the graphic design, whoever they hired for the graphic design of this really knows their stuff.
All right. Well, before we head out of here, I just want to say go check out Properly Howard's A Few Good Films. It was a really fun season. You can listen to all their movies that have to do with.
I have to tell the guys that we were flying recently for the Christmas holidays, and on the flight back, I was browsing through the seat back, and A Few Good Men was there. I watched it. That's a hell of a movie.
So next couple of weeks, you probably look forward to our coverage of A Few Good Men. We are also working on Moneyball.
That's a good one.
And this next week will probably already be out by the time this podcast comes out. Ghost.
Ooh,
Oh,
very nice.
Oh, Cocktail's in there somewhere.
Okay.
So that's kind of our roster. For
you got to
this
pitch. You got to at least pitch the concept for A Few Good Men film, just in case for new people.
Steve.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to watch A Few Good Men, and then we decided we had to draft a movie to watch that starred someone from a principal character or a contributor to A Few Good Men, and we would select an actor, a movie with the actor in it, but then that actor was not able to be selected after that.
Great, classic Properly Howard draft nonsense.
That's right.
Very nice.
Yeah,
Very nice.
we covered some really horrible movies, but a couple of really great movies. But as I've learned over time, any movie is a great watch if you get to talk to Steve about it afterwards.
Oh,
And
well,
we
look at
learned that on the Star Wars holiday special. We had a great time. We re-released it for this holiday season. I
Fantastic.
think. Oh wait, did we? No, I think I just tweeted about it.
Okay.
All right. So otherwise on the network, we've got We'll Shift Us finishing up Silo. I think by the time this airs, they'll be covering episode 9, the season finale. So go check all that out. Alicia's got all her spoiler cast on her subscriber feeds and everything. She's got a whole world over there. You just get over there. There's plenty of stuff. And Radioactive Ramblings is doing some Studio Ghibli stuff. I think they just did Spirited Away.
Studio Ghibli.
I'm going to say Ghibli until I die.
It's a GIF.
Don't
not a
speak to me
GIF.
that way. Anyway, they're doing Studio Ghibli, Ghibli, and they're doing some Red Rising books. They're covering the Red Rising book series, which is a pretty good book series. I gotta say, I've read it. Then, very quickly, never mind the music. They just did a Wicked episode, so you can listen to them talk about Defying Gravity, and they have weekly coverage of a psychology professor and a music professor talking about the intersection between the two and all the juicy lore that comes with that. On the Lorehounds feed, you have a lot coming up. You got Silmarillion stories. You got a Nosferatu movie review coming out soon. And
we got a couple of Dune wrap-up things that we got to do real quick, too. We're going to do a little bit of feedback and then talk to the Dune Minute podcast guys about the end of Dune Prophecy.
very nice. Plenty of stuff over there. Wheel of Time coming right on the tails of Severance. So plenty going on the main feed. Subscribe to all the feeds. They're all in the show notes. What are you doing? It's free. All right, everyone. It's been real fun on this Properly Howard and Lorehounds joint production. We'll see you for episode 1 of Severance Season 2. This podcast is a joint production of the Lorehounds and Properly Howard. Click the link tree in the show notes for links to more podcasts, our Discord server, and ways to support the show. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities.
Here's it to Franco the beans.
Your neighborhood just got cooler with Kroger Delivery's refrigerated trucks. Simply order groceries at the same great prices online as in-store, and we'll bring them to you fresh every time. And if that wasn't cool enough, you can now earn 4 times the fuel points after 4 with your digital coupon. Choose a next-day Kroger delivery time slot for 4 p.m. or later on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Must deliver by February 4th. Restrictions apply. See Kroger.com for details.